Hi. So last week in the discussion of the early history of the Sioux City Art Center, we got to the point where the WPA Sioux City Art Center had opened its doors. This is February of 1938. And for the first year plus, things proceeded very smoothly with a lot of activity. What was amazing about the early days of the WPA Art Center was how many different artists were involved in making everything run. There were local artists like Roy Langley, young emerging artists like George Rush and Laverne Frank, who actually met by working at the Art Center and fell in love and got married. Artists from different parts of Iowa like Don and Chris GLASELL came from Dubuque. Bob White, who I mentioned in an earlier episode from this series, came from Des Moines, actually brought with him the whole statewide WPA art network. Other artists came from farther out. We had artists coming from New York and other parts of the country, all either spending portions of, maybe a few months here and there teaching, and others committed on a more permanent basis. After about a year or so of immense activity with exhibitions and classes and programs, they started to run into a little bit of a difficulty with the funding. The Art Center Association of Sioux City, which had started as the Society of Fine Arts, was funding as much as possible the activities, and of course they were getting some sponsorship from the federal government through the WPA. But in early 1939, the city stepped in and offered a stipend to help with a year's worth of utility costs. And so that kept things going for a good while. But once we got to the early stages of 1941, even though we were still almost a year out from joining World War II, the director at the time, Robert MILLIKEN, sensed that the federal government was about ready to shift its focus from domestic spending on programs like the WPA toward military preparation. So he began working locally to try to find new solutions to make sure that the Art Center kept going. One of the things he tried to do was to find a different location, a larger location that would enable the Art Center to expand what it could do and potentially raise additional funds. And they looked at what was then the old auditorium, but they couldn't quite make a deal on that with the owners. But that process where they were working with the City of Sioux City to try to make this deal happen, forged an alliance between the Art Center Association and the city. So literally less than 2 weeks after Pearl Harbor and the US's entry into World War II, the Art Center and the city signed an official agreement. The agreement stated that the city would appoint a board of trustees who would oversee certain portions of the mostly the physical front of the Art Center, while the association would continue to fund as much as possible the programming. And for a while, the WPA was still involved, so there was a moment where all three were working together. But eventually, as 1942 went through, and obviously everybody's attention was on World War II, funding from the WPA ended. And the Art Center was able to continue in on a very skeletal way through the rest of World War II with support from the city, a little bit of support from the Art Center Association, and basically one person, Roy Langley, overseeing everything that we did. So he taught the classes, put up the exhibitions, worked with groups who would use the facility for rentals, and worked on outreach, because during this time, the Art Center became a war service center. So while we were still doing art, we were also doing things like creating posters to encourage war bond purchases. We were helping the servicemen out at the air base for social engagements, and we helped set up suppers for them in people's homes. And we worked with them on different art projects as well. And it was pretty much just this one person, Roy Langley, who was able to carry us through the entire war and get us through to the other side. Roy Langley remained on as director through 1948. That 3-year tenure between the end of World War II and the end of his tenure as director was really important. He got us back on track, doing what we were doing during the WPA days, building the staff back up, expanding our programs, and building success that we've now sustained for more than 80 years.